we're going to try to take a few minutes to review some of our most recent additions. So I'm going to ask that you turn over your notes, don't look at them, and let's see what we can remember together. We'll do it as a group. We're not going to put anybody on the spot, but we want to see what we can remember about these Bible time periods together. So I think admittedly, the ones that we are going to review tonight are the most densely packed of all of these. That is, they have the most information, I think, and in some ways are the biggest ones that are the most difficult to remember everything. But I want to see how we do. All right. So at the end of the previous Bible time period, that is, what is the Bible time period before the Exodus? The patriarchs. All right. At the end of that Bible time period, apparently they decided to turn sirens on at the ER behind me tonight. That's very convenient. So at the time of at the end of the time period of the patriarchs, we talk about the story of Joseph. And when we leave off with the story of Joseph, where is Joseph and his family, all of the sons and grandsons of Jacob? Where are they? Geographically, Egypt. Where are they?
In Egypt.
They're in Egypt. When we open the book of Exodus, are they still in Egypt?
Yes.
Yes. Are they still a family of 75 people that are enjoying all the privileges of Egypt?
No.
No. What we have to start with at the beginning of the Exodus time period is Israel in bondage. All right. So I'm just trying to firmly establish that link in your mind between the previous time period and this time period. That's what I want to make sure. If you have a solid starting point, then the rest of it will sort of flow more naturally. All right, so give me the rest of the bullet points. Let's just go as quickly as we can by way of review so that we can add on tonight. What's next?
Moses' birth.
All right, Moses' birth. What's next? It's also about Moses.
His Pharaoh's daughter that becomes his mother.
Okay. All right. He was raised as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. All right. When he got the bright idea to be the hero of Israel, did that go very well?
No.
Right. So he was rejected by his people. All right. What's next? What happened?
Flee to Midian.
All right. He flees to the wilderness. Good.
Burning bush.
Okay, that's right. The burning bush turns the tide of the story. All right. So with the burning bush, he's sent back to Egypt. What's next?
The plagues.
All right. The plagues. Good.
The death, the death of the firstborn would be the 10th plague, but they flee and cross the Red Sea.
All right, good. Crossing of the Red Sea. Good. What's the next major stop after the crossing of the Red Sea?
Mount Sinai.
All right. So you have the trip to Mount Sinai and then the events at Mount Sinai. All right, good. After they spent almost a year at Mount Sinai, after they left there, where's the next major stop?
Kadesh.
All right, that's right, Kadesh. Good. And from there, what happened?
Well, yeah.
All right, that's right. It's from Kadesh that they sent spies into the land, and and then what happened?
Israel refused to go.
That's right. Israel refused to go into the land. Good. All right. So they refused to go into the land. That brings us to our next Bible time period of wandering in the wilderness. All right. So Israel refused to go into the land. So what was God's response?
He sentenced them to wander for
All right.
40 years.
That's right. God sentenced them to wander in the wilderness for 40 years. All right. Now let's talk about some of the major events that happened during the period of the wandering. What's next? I'll give you a hint. Rebellion.
Korah.
All right. Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. Good. In response to that, God wanted to submit and signify Aaron and Moses' leadership before the people. So how did he do that?
Aaron's rod budded.
Good. All right. Aaron's rod budded.
Miriam died.
All right. Miriam died. Moses and Aaron's sister. All right. Something big happened with Moses and Aaron.
That the waters of Meribah,
All
where
right. That's right.
the rock.
That's right. They sinned at the waters of Meribah. Okay. All right. What else? They're making their way toward the promised land, making their way toward Canaan, but they've got some territory to cover to get there.
Passing by Edom.
All right. They passed by Edom. Good. The people got impatient because of the journey. And God sent these as punishment.
Serpents.
All right, the fiery serpents. Good. All right. Oops, I'm sorry, I skipped one. See, my memory failed me. We got Aaron's death because Moses and Aaron weren't going to be permitted to enter into the land. I skipped one. Then we've got the story of the fiery serpents. All right. Now, I'm going to put a map up on the screen, and just to give you a little bit of some of what we have talked about. Can everybody see that map clearly? All right. So here's Egypt and the general region of from which Israel exited. The precise location of the crossing of the Red Sea is, well, needless to say, debated. And generally, it is thought that Mount Sinai is down here in what today we call the Sinai Peninsula, also known as Mount Horeb. And then from there, they traveled, and here is Kadesh Barnea. This is where they were when the spies were sent into the land. This is the land of Canaan. This is the promised land to which they were headed. And so you would see that from Sinai, the most direct route would just be go north up through this region and into the land. But this is where they rebelled. And so then they were sentenced to wander in the wilderness. This is the land of Edom. They passed by Edom. And what we're getting to is this approach. Can you see this red arrow line? What we're getting to is this approach that the children of Israel are going to take as they get ready to cross the Jordan River into the land of Canaan. And so we're going to zoom in a little bit into that, and we can take a look. So we've talked about passing by Edom. We're going to talk about this journey through regarding Moab, Sion, Ammon. All of this is going to be part of our discussion. All right. So let's back up to our discussion of wandering in the wilderness. Wow, I wish that would resume in the bullet points where I was. Okay. So we've been through all of these. All right. So we are talking about we've gotten to Aaron's death and fiery serpents. All right. So as the children of Israel make their way toward the promised land, they begin to encounter some of their first resistance. And so let's talk about that. Who did they conquer first? Sion, king of the Amorites. Anybody remember who else? Og, king of Bashan. And this is where the story of another name with the letter B comes in.
Balaam.
This is the story of Balaam. Good. Now, even though Balaam was not able to pronounce a curse upon the people of Israel directly, he caused them to stumble, committing fornication with the who? Midianites. Good. All right. You have a second census of the people, which marks the passing of one generation and a new generation taking their place in Israel. The slaughter of the Midianites, the vengeance taken upon them for causing the children of Israel to stumble. Moses' speeches in the book of Deuteronomy. Moses' death, the crossing of the Jordan River, and observing the Passover. All right. So that then brings us to our next Bible time period. That's not what I wanted. Got the wrong map. All right, we're going to get ready for this map. What's our next Bible time period?
Invasion and conquest.
All right, the invasion and conquest of the land. All right. Now I'm going to. All right. Let's see what we remember about the invasion and conquest of the land. Where did the children of Israel start the invasion and conquest of the land?
Jericho.
All right. Top, middle, or bottom of the land of Canaan?
That was the central campaign.
All right. So it's the central campaign. And we mentioned Jericho. And there are two other places in connection with Jericho that are mentioned in the early part of the invasion and conquest. Anybody remember the two other names?
Ai and Shechem.
I heard something, but I didn't understand. Say it again.
Ai, and Shechem.
Okay. Ai and Bethel, and then they stake their claim in the land of Shechem. All right. So this is where Israel stakes their claim in the heart of the land of Canaan. Good. All right. What direction did they go next?
South.
All right. So then you have the southern campaign. They make a treaty with the Gibeonites and then fight the kings of the south. So there's one more direction to go. Anybody want to take a guess?
North.
North. Okay, good. All right. That wasn't intended as a trick question. Good. All right. The northern campaign, and they fight the kings of the north, particularly led by Jabin, king of Hazor. Now, after the land has been invaded and conquered, what comes next?
They divided up.
All right. They divide up the land among the tribes. Now, particularly, there were some tribes that had kind of already staked their territory, not really in the land of Canaan, as it were. They had already staked their territory. Who was that, and where had they staked their territory?
Manasseh.
All right, Manasseh,
Reuben.
Reuben,
Okay.
and Gad. All right, and where had they staked their claim?
East of the Jordan.
All right, east of the Jordan River. And so the Transjordanic tribes return home. So I'm going to put this map up here. This is the tribal territories of Israel. And so in particular, you notice that Manasseh has territory on both sides of the Jordan River, east and west, but you have Reuben, Gad, and the half tribe of Manasseh. Here's the Jordan River. This is we would call this the Sea of Galilee. That's the more familiar term from the New Testament. The Sea of Galilee, the Jordan River, and the Dead Sea, or sometimes called the Salt Sea because of its salt content. That's why it's dead. Nothing can live there, basically. These are the Transjordanic tribes, all right? And then you see the distribution of the land of Canaan. All right? So the Transjordanic tribes return home, and what comes next? I'm going to try to get us caught up here. What comes next in our list? Joshua challenged the people to be faithful and to reject idols. He challenges them to choose whom they will serve, and then they renew their covenant with Jehovah. That brings us to the period of the Judges. And when we talk about the period of the Judges, I said, even if you don't remember the whole list of Judges, there's something about this Bible time period that I want you to remember. What was it?
The cycle.
All right, that's exactly right. I want you to remember the cycle. And you don't necessarily have to remember these specific words, though it would probably be easiest if we were all speaking the same language, so to speak. But to remember this cycle, when things are going well, there's peace. The people go into apostasy. That is, they leave God, they rebel against him. God brings about oppression on the people from their enemies to punish them. The people cry out in repentance and ask to be saved. God delivers them from their enemies. They enjoy a period of peace again, and the cycle continues. This is the story of this is the story of the period of the Judges over and over and over again. Peace, apostasy, oppression, repentance, deliverance. Peace, apostasy, oppression, repentance, deliverance. So let's try to just remember those 5 words in that order. All right. So when we talk about the period of the Judges, I'm just going to put all of these up here at the same time. You have 15 in the list. Abimelech is, again, technically not a judge, but a leader of this time period. And then you have 3 other bullet points in this period. You have the story of Micah and the Levite's concubine. These 2 stories are included in this period because they're illustrative. That is, they illustrate what was going on in Israel during the period of the Judges. And then you also have the book of Ruth fits into this time period, not because it illustrates what was going on, but just chronologically, historically, that's where it is. All right. So that is a review of where we are at this point in our study. All right, let's talk about some new material tonight. Anybody have any questions about what we've reviewed? All right, I know that's not the most exciting thing in the world, is to go back and review, but we want to try to get these big points in our heads as much as we can. All right, let's talk about the period of the United Kingdom. There are three, count them, three one-word bullet points to the United Kingdom. What are they?
Saul, David, and Solomon.
Saul, David, and Solomon. All right. I gave you a preview of that last week just because I wanted you to have something to look forward to. It's Saul, David, and Solomon. There are too many stories to really even begin to break this period down anymore. But you have the reign of Saul, David, and Solomon. That's the period of the United Kingdom. Do we need to review that anymore, or we got that? All right. Let's talk about the divided kingdom. The period of the divided kingdom. We talk about the divided kingdom. All right. What do we have up to the north?
Israel.
All right. The kingdom of Israel to the north. All right. The kingdom of Israel to the north. And that leaves what kingdom to the south?
Judah.
And
Judah to the south.
Judah to the south. All right. All right. Does anyone know how long this existed, this divided kingdom existed? It's about 200 years. All right. This is the period of the divided kingdom, and it's about 200 years from the time of the division of the kingdom until Israel is taken away into captivity, and that leads to our next Bible time period, which is the United Kingdom, divided kingdom, and then
Judah alone.
Judah alone. So you have 200 years of divided kingdom history. All right. Who can tell me I won't ask for all of them. Who can tell me one of the minor prophets of the divided kingdom, and see if you can do it without looking at your notes?
Isaiah.
All right. Isaiah is a major prophet.
Oh, you said mine.
Yeah, it's a minor prophet. Isaiah begins prophesying in the time of the divided kingdom and continues into Judah alone. But let's talk about minor prophets. Minor prophets of the divided kingdom.
Obadiah.
All right, Obadiah,
Amos.
Amos,
Joel.
Joel.
Okay.
I heard something but didn't understand it.
Hosea.
Hosea. Two more.
Micah.
Micah
Jonah.
and Jonah. All right, so the first six of the minor prophets, Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, and Micah, are all prophets of the divided kingdom. And then, as we said, Isaiah begins in the divided kingdom but continues into the time of Judah alone. All right. So let's see if we can remember that. All right. Let's see if you wrote that down. Turn your notes over. Don't cheat. Don't look. Let's see what you can remember. All right. So the first two are just a description of the divided kingdom. And if you can remember divided kingdom and you can remember the hand motions, then you can remember the first two bullet points. You have the kingdom of
Israel.
Israel to the north and the kingdom of
Judah.
Judah to the south. And it lasts how long?
200
years.
You've got two kingdoms. It's 200 years. There's a way you can remember that. Two kingdoms, 200 years until Israel is taken away in captivity. How do we remember the minor prophets that prophesied during this time?
Okay.
It's the first six. All right. So you've got 12 minor prophets, the first half of them. And when I say the first half, I mean as the order they're in the Bible. The first half of them go with the divided kingdom. All right. All right. And then you have the prophet Isaiah, and he's going to bridge the gap, the divided kingdom, into the time of what? What comes next?
Judah alone.
Judah alone. All right, good. Judah alone. All right. There are three major kings of the period of Judah alone. Now, they're not the only kings, but they're the ones whose big stories fit into this time period. The kings are Hezekiah, Manasseh, and Josiah. And Hezekiah, Manasseh, and Josiah kind of represent the history in many ways of this Bible time period. Hezekiah comes in, tries to do what's right, but he struggles. Manasseh undoes a lot of the work that his father Hezekiah had done. Josiah tried to bring about reforms in Judah to save them, but ultimately his sons and grandson bring about our next Bible time period. And so Hezekiah, Manasseh, and Josiah, those are the major kings of this time period, Judah alone. Now, we said Isaiah begins during the period of the divided kingdom and continues into the time of Judah alone. What other major prophet did his work during the time of Judah alone?
Jeremiah.
Jeremiah fits into the period of Judah alone. What about minor prophets?
Nahum.
Nahum,
Habakkuk.
Habakkuk, one more. Zephaniah. That's right. Nahum, Habakkuk, and Zephaniah. These were the prophets of Judah alone. Now, remember, there are a total of 12 minor prophets. The first half of them, the first six, go with the divided kingdom. All right, so you've got 6 left. Those last 6 are divided evenly, 3 and 3. 3 of those go with Judah alone, and the final 3 we'll talk about here in just a minute. All right, but the period of Judah alone, the kings are Hezekiah, Manasseh, and Josiah, and the prophets are Jeremiah, Nahum, Habakkuk, and Zephaniah. All right. All right. What Bible time period comes next? All right, captivity. All right, the story of the captivity. Now, specifically, this Bible time period is talking about whose captivity?
Judas.
Judah.
Judah's captivity. It's true that Israel had been taken captive, but Israel was never coming back, at least as Israel. And so the captivity that we're talking about is the captivity from which there was a return from captivity, and that's the captivity of Judah. Really, all that, the only kind of bullet point, the only kind of sub point to this that you need to remember are the major prophets of the captivity. They're the ones who kind of tell us the story of the captivity. Who are the major prophets of the captivity?
Daniel and Ezekiel.
Ezekiel.
Daniel and Ezekiel. All right, that's right. Daniel and Ezekiel. Simple way to remember that, they're the only major prophets left. So you've got Isaiah, that is divided kingdom and Judah alone. Jeremiah, which includes Lamentations in Judah alone. And so now you've got two major prophets left. That's Daniel and Ezekiel. They go with the captivity. Right? And that brings us then to the return from captivity. The return from captivity. We've talked about the books of history and prophets that go with this. All right, now, like we did with the invasion and conquest of the land, we're going to start with the simplified version. Remember the major parts of this, and then we'll fill in a few details next week. We talk about the return from captivity. We are not talking about one mass return of the people, right? We're talking about them coming back in stages. And by the way, that's how they went into captivity. Judah did not fall all at once. Jerusalem did not fall all at once. You have the first invasion of Judah by the Babylonians in about 606 or 605 BC, and then the fall of Jerusalem didn't happen until 586. There's about 20 years there. And similarly, there's about 20 years from the time the return starts until the last captives return. So, so the return from captivity. When you think about the return from captivity, there were some people, particularly, who led the return of captives to Jerusalem. And without any reference to particular order at the moment, I just want to see if you know any of those names. Names that led people, led the captives back to Judah. There any names that stick out in your mind?
Zerubbabel.
All right, Zerubbabel was one. Mostly because that's just a really fun name to say. Okay, Zerubbabel. All right. It's one of my favorite Bible names, by the way. I don't know why nobody ever names their son Zerubbabel. I love it. Okay. What else? Any other names?
Ezra.
Ezra. All right. There are a couple of other names that provided leadership during this time. Nehemiah is one, and Jeshua is another. So the first return was led by Zerubbabel and Jeshua. their story is in the book of Ezra. But they led the first return, and they led the first return of captives back to Judah for the purpose of rebuilding the temple. The story of Esther fits into this Bible time period between Ezra chapter 6 and 7. So if you were reading chronologically, you read Ezra 1 through 6, you take a break, go to Esther, and come back and pick up with Ezra in chapter 7. Ezra led a return to purify the worship of the people of Judah. So you have them getting, first you have the temple as the place of worship, the center of the Jewish worship being rebuilt. And then Ezra comes back to get the people back on the right track with their worship. And then Nehemiah led the final return for the purpose of rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem. So Zerubbabel and Jeshua, Esther, Ezra, Nehemiah. All right, I'm about to get kicked off of here. That's the big picture. We'll fill in some details next week. You all have a great week. Thanks for joining me to study. Good night, everybody.
Night.
Good night.